Okay, we're here on the outskirts of Vilna in the Uzhapij cemetery, which we mentioned was completely desecrated. And we're at the Kever of Rabbi Baruch there. Chad min Kamaya. Now, first let's talk about what's Rabbi Baruch Ber doing here. You know, one time, a certain darshan gave a drasha, and he was talking about the importance of Torah. And he said, Torah is so important, it's like avir l'neshima, it's like air to breathe. He was highlighting the centrality of Torah to the life of a Jew. And Rabbi Baruch Ber, who is of gentle spirit, Rabbi Baruch Ber protested. How could you say such a thing about the Torah? It's only like air to breathe. That implies that Torah only enables life. It's much more than that. It's much more basic than that. It's not like air to breathe. It's life itself. Kihem chayenu. How dare you say Torah is just like air to breathe? That was Rabbi Baruch Ber's devekus to Torah. Rabbi Baruch Ber lived from 1862 to 1939. He was so mizdabek to his Rebbe, Rabbi Baruch Ber. If anybody ever was zoicha to learn a piece of the Berch HaShmuel, the way he refers to Rashka Bahag, Adoinenu, Marenu, Rabbeinu, Reb Chaim, his whole life and all of his Shiurim were rooted in the Torah of Reb Chaim Brisker. In fact, at the end of the life of Rabbi Baruch Ber, he was in Vilna. What was he doing in Vilna? Because the Nazis were coming, and the only protection for the Olam HaYeshivas was in Vilna, under the auspices, under the canopy of Reb Chaim Oizer. Reb Chaim Oizer asked Reb Baruch Ber to lead all the Bnei HaYeshivas in Vilna. Reb Baruch Ber was already in advanced age. He was already very weak. He was in his final illness. And in his final days, he kept on saying, V'shavti el beis avi, V'shavti el beis avi, V'shavti el beis avi. Nobody knew what it meant. Then Rabbi Baruch Ber asked to be dressed in his finest clothing because he felt the presence of his Rebbe, Reb Chaim. In his final moments, he felt he was returning to Reb Chaim. So he put on his finest. He straightened himself out like he was about to greet a very distinguished guest. And in his final moments, he was reunited with the Torah. He said, Ahava Rabbah. He said, V'shavti el beis avi. And he was reunited with Reb Chaim Brisker. He was born in Slutsk. You know that Rabbi Baruch Ber came to America. He came with his future son-in-law, Eruvin Grozovsky. He gave Shiurim in Yeshivas Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan. He gave Shiurim in New York and in many cities. When the mayor of New York City, Jimmy Walker, met Rabbi Baruch Ber, he was so taken, he gave him the keys to the city. So if you wanted to know who has the keys to the city of New York, Rabbi Baruch Ber. Not only that, Jimmy Walker, when he saw Rabbi Baruch Ber, said, "You, sir, disprove evolution. If there could be a human being of such grace, of such dignity, of such sanctity, then you're clearly the Yitzir Kapav of HaKadosh Baruch Hu." Now, nobody understood what it meant that Rabbi Baruch Ber said, V'shavti el beis avi, but they realized what he wanted to be buried next to his father. But this cemetery, hard to imagine, had not even 1 inch of empty space in it. So how are they going to bury him next to his father? But his father was buried, so to speak, at the end of a row. And in the aisle, there was some extra space. And the Gedolim said, even though you don't usually bury in the aisle, but since this was the request of Baruch Ber, they buried him in the 1 millimeter of empty space here in this entire cemetery. You look at it now, you can't even imagine such a thing. About 13 years ago, a little girl in New York, from a family of very prestigious Rosh Yeshiva, during recess, they were playing with Gedolim pictures, and she saw the picture of Rabbi Baruch Ber, and she disparaged his Tzura Kedosha. She immediately had a seizure, and she contracted a terrible illness, and she became disfigured, and nobody could explain it. It was inexplicable. So the family being related to great Rosh Yeshiva asked, well, what were the conditions that this happened? And they found out that she criticized the appearance of Rabbi Baruch Ber. And they asked the Shaila, what do we need to do? They were told, you need to ask Rabbi Baruch Ber for Mechila. Mechila, we don't know where Rabbi Baruch Ber was buried, because after the Holocaust, after he was buried here, the cemetery was destroyed and nobody had known about his whereabouts for many, many, many decades. So how are they going to ask him for Mechila? They got a hold of the aerial map of this cemetery. They located the Kever of Rabbi Baruch Ber's father, and from there they were able to trace exactly where Rabbi Baruch Ber was buried, and that's why today here is brought Hamatzeva Hukama B'Yom Dalid B'Kislev Tavshin Ayin Hey, that 11 years ago, and Rabbi Baruch Ber was nifter on a Friday, Hey B'Kislev. So it's interesting, the Matzeva was put up on Dalid Kislev. His yard site is Hey Kislev. He was the founder of the branch of Slobodka called Knesset Beis Yitzchak, and considered one of the fathers of the Olam HaYeshivas today. B'chusa Yagein Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Okay.